Well, hello again. Pastor Ray Barnett here with you. Glad that you could be with me on the Oasis. And as always, I wish you a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening, depending on what time you're watching this broadcast. Once again, a very pleasant day here. A little colder than it has been during the previous few days, but nonetheless, we're well into December now with still no snow. Maybe tomorrow a little bit. All right. Let me repeat myself for all the new subscribers. What I've been sharing with you as advice is to stick with me from the beginning right to the end of these broadcasts so that you can get the actual substance of what I'm trying to share with you and to impart the wisdom that I have on this subject to you. The end result, what we're looking for, is to get rid of your symptoms for good. But this, again, takes time. And as I spoke to you about, today is Friday, I spoke to you about this on Wednesday. It takes a Spartan-like discipline. It takes a discipline to not be able to respond to your symptoms either hysterically, which would be the worst case scenario, or to respond to your symptoms with anger and fear. And this is, maybe perhaps you're already starting to say, well, that's impossible. And actually, it's not impossible. More than that, it's the way to conquer them for good. This is going to take time. So I advise you, at least encourage you, to stay with me. Try to keep the broadcast to 20 minutes, no more. And stick with me for the introduction. Then there's a middle portion. Then there's an end. Okay. Today, I want to talk to you about the function of imagination and the role that it plays in nervous symptoms, in panic attacks, even in depression, and so on. Imagination. Let me say it this way. The imagination of an event, something that you're facing, something you're anxious about, the imagination of the event is most times worse than the actual event itself. That's sort of a paraphrase of ancient wisdom. Seneca, the Roman philosopher, Stoic philosopher, said something very similar to that your imagination of an event is actually worse than the event itself. And I can say that experience has taught me that this is the truth. Your imagination of anxious anticipation of something, including your symptoms, and that's our object here, right? That's our lesson, rather. That's what we're aiming at, to rid you of your symptoms. You're imagining what the event is going to be like, let's say heart palpitations, and your anticipation, your fearful anticipation of the event, which involves the imagination, is actually worse than the event itself. Now, you may feel inclined to contradict me on that and say, no, the panic attacks, they're awful. The depression is awful. And then we go through this again, this long litany of symptoms that any one of you can have and do have. But I will stick with my guns in this respect from what I've learned over many, many long years, decades. The imagination of an event is actually worse than the event itself when it involves something you're afraid of. So, the function of imagination is pretty simple. It's like the will. The will has a very simple function. It says yes or it says no. The function of the will is simply to decide. That's it. Yes, no. And the function of imagination is pretty similar in its simplicity. The function of the imagination is to, well, with regard to symptoms anyway, is to interpret events. So, you get a feeling or a sensation, and especially if it's one that you've had before, so you have some experience with this, and it feels like there's a panic attack coming on. And your imagination begins to recall, let me say this, your memory begins to recall all of what you went through in the past. But it's the imagination that begins to bring up all types of dire circumstances, and before you know it, you're back in the emergency room, or in some cases, some of you I know, you're back in a mental health ward, psychiatric ward. And this has been brought on by the function of imagination. So if we went with the statement I made at the beginning of the broadcast here, that the imagination of an event, a fearful anticipation, right? Because imagination covers a lot of things. I mean, you can imagine good things as well. Still a function of interpretation of an event, even though it may not be real. It's still same function. So I'm specifically narrowing it down to you thinking about something that is causing you fear. And again, so the stomach starts to churn, you can't eat, you lose your appetite, you're losing your sleep, there's palpitations and sweats, and again, thousands of symptoms, thoughts racing through your mind. This is where we have to conquer, this is where you have to conquer your thought life. The anticipation, let's say, again, I'll just use panic attack as an example, but there's thousands of symptoms. Yours may be different. The anticipation of a panic attack, in a very odd way, is what actually will precipitate it and bring it on. So you start to think about it, you start to imagine it, your memory is recalling things that have happened in the past, perhaps thousands of times in the past, and it's already priming the pump for another panic attack or another anxiety attack. I used to have a terrible anxiety about the dentist. It was, well, when I was a child, I never had any anxiety about the dentist at all. As I got older, I was in my 30s. I needed some periodontal work, and so I had some surgery. And it left my teeth unbelievably sensitive, just super, super sensitive. So for years, I just avoided going, and thankfully, I never had any cavities, I never had any toothaches or anything, so I thought it was good. But when I finally, got a bit older, and I said, I really got to start visiting the dentist, there was an incredible anxiety. I mean, it really was. I mean, it's laughable because, a grown man and grown women, I know people who have to take tranquilizers to go to the dentist. Anyway, I had this anxiety. And my imagination would just take me to places where, you don't want to go. And I would have to play, which you're going to have to do too. I would play these mental games, with myself, and just some things that are kind of unique to my own way of thinking, to get myself have enough courage to actually go to the dentist and, have my teeth taken care of as we all should. That's a real good idea. It's a real good idea to see your dentist on a regular basis. Now, we know that. But there's an example of how many things does anxiety functioning through the imagination keep us from actually doing. And not leading a productive life, not leading a full life, always cutting back, always trimming your sails, never really able to, do a lot of things that you would, let's say, dream of. And then there's so many functions of life that you avoid. You avoid crowds, you avoid parties, you avoid even sometimes being with your family, and the list just goes on and on and on. And we say it's anxiety, which of course it is, but what I'm trying to share is what's bringing on the anxiety is imagination. Here's something that's I've brought this to you rather quite a few times, and this is very important today. Once you've been thoroughly checked out by physician or physicians plural, and they're saying there's nothing, your heart is fine, and you're whatever, you don't have an organic, palpable disease. Once it is diagnosed with some degree of assurance that these are nervous symptoms, the good news is this: no matter how bad they feel, they're harmless. They have no power to harm your health at all. So you say, well, maybe you're saying it's not good news. You're saying, I've been suffering all this time, and now you're telling me that it's harmless? Well, yeah, that's the truth. So then what makes it actually, in a manner of speaking, what makes it so harmful? It's the imagination. As you begin to anticipate, again, fearful anticipation of an event, let's just relate it to symptoms. You begin to anticipate that panic attack again, or that depression, or those obsessive thoughts and thoughts that pop into your mind. And some of them are frightening. I've read of people who, see a kitchen knife, and then they see their infant child or baby, and they just get this thought that I'm going to take that knife and I'm going to hurt the baby. Which in most cases, obviously in this present evil world that we live in, it does happen, but for the average individual, that's never going to happen. So what is happening is the imagination is engaged and brings about this very fearful, perhaps obsessive thought, and it needs to be conquered. And it's conquered by contradicting it. If you're going to imagine anything, imagine a good outcome. And actually, when we read the Bible, again, speaking about the function of imagination, when we read the Bible, we have to use our imagination. When you read anything, you have to use your imagination to interpret events, to interpret what the writer is trying to say, and so on. We use our imagination for a lot of things. And if you're going to imagine something, or picture, right? Image, imagination, picture. If you're going to picture something, picture yourself as what the Bible says about you. I have the mind of Christ. I have the peace of Christ. Even when you don't feel that peace, the Bible says we have it. So we can imagine it, and it's really not the way we usually use the term imagination. Like, imagine you have something you don't have. In this case, the imagination is used to picture something we actually do have. So I hope that makes sense to you. But like I told you, on these broadcasts, the subject is very large, and it's very difficult for me, at least as a teacher, to cram it all into these little they're not sound bites or audio bites, but just kind of cramming it all in. Wish I had more time to really elaborate so you had a better understanding of things. But 20 minutes is all I allow myself, so that you don't turn me off. Anyway, so you have to use your imagination to picture things in the Bible, or picture things when you're reading a novel or a book. The imagination is used for quite a few things. And if you're going to picture anything, start to picture yourself being healthy, and picture yourself being healed by Christ, and so on. This is where the discipline comes in. This is where that Spartan-like discipline comes in. And it is still a function of the imagination, even though for us who read and believe the Bible, it's based on principle. I'll give you another example. Yesterday, I had to take my dog to the vets. My dog is 91 or so pounds. He's lightning fast and very strong enough to pull me down, and exceptionally bright. I can go on and on about my dog. He's just something, but he doesn't like the vets, and that's the problem. He don't even like to be brushed. And last time we were there, I had him muzzled, and it took me some time here at the house. He's a very wiry dog. He's a really good dog, and he actually likes people. But if you walk up my driveway, he wouldn't think that he does. And he has an on and off switch, and he knows if I'm relaxed, he's okay with a person. For some reason I'm not relaxed, he's not okay. And that's not a good sign for somebody else. Okay, so I have him all muzzled up, everything's good. Get him in the car. The vet's is very close, only a mile and a half up the street. And when I get to the office, they tell me, well, Mr. Barnett, that muzzle's not good. Here, put this one. I had to take one off, put the other one on. So I'm trying to get him by one hand, right? And then put the new one on with the other hand, and it was just a disaster. I couldn't wait to get out of there. The dog doesn't like it. I don't like it. I don't think the vet likes it. Nobody likes it. So I had to go back yesterday. And for days in advance, I was thinking about this. And I said to myself, oh, man, here we go again. But how I conquered that through imagination is I kept rehearsing. First of all, I was rehearsing what things I will do. And I didn't rehearse it in a kind of a dreamy way, like, oh, hey, the dog's all calm and everybody's all happy, because I knew that wouldn't be the correct scenario. What I did is I rehearsed it in my mind that I would be having problems with the dog, and the people there weren't going to be too, they're used to dealing with dogs like this, but they're not going to be too all that enthused. And I'm on my own. I don't have anybody with me, nobody's coming with me. And so I just rehearsed in my mind the difficulties I was going to have, and just kept playing it, and then picturing myself how I was going to react. So I'm doing all this in advance. Okay, so the visit went fine. It really went fine. Now, how does that apply to you? Well, if you're going to anticipate a panic attack, if you're going to anticipate an event, you don't want to do it with fear. Rehearse in your mind that this is going to be difficult. Now, this is where the discipline comes in. You rehearse in your mind that this is going to be difficult to get through. Palpitations come back. It's going to be difficult. Rehearse in your mind is going to be difficult. But see yourself as not panicking, as conquering this event. So even though there's fear involved, you have to start to rehearse in your mind, which is a function of the imagination. But what you're trying to do is imagine a better outcome than you have had in the past, which was actually part of your experience. So, in essence, as a pastor and as a biblicist, I could say that what this is, in essence, is faith. Jesus said, have faith in God. Or rather, he said, have faith in me. You believe in God, believe thou also in me. This is the inner workings of what happens to you prior to an event of one of your symptoms or something else that's going to bring on your symptoms. Oh, one last thing. Keep this in mind, very, very important. When you go, whether it's the dentist or the vets or whatever it is, what you fear is not really the event itself. This is very critical. That's why I tell you to stick with how people probably already tuned off, turned it off a long time ago. Here's the most important part of it. You fear your sensations, not the actual event. You fear what you're feeling, not the actual event. So if you control your thoughts and realize that what I'm afraid of is what I'm feeling, not so much the event itself, you'll have success. Rehearse, go through the experiences, brain learns new habits, you're good to go. And that's in the course of time, because always remember that these things don't come easy. So keep reminding you about that. This is not the type of channel where you're going to get, some baloney, where you're going to say, oh, yeah, wow, I just got to whistle and sing a song. That may help, but this is going to get done. Conquering your symptoms is going to get done through a great resolve of the will and discipline. Let me pray for you today. Father, I do pray for my friends, and I hope that they will be able to take these lessons that I give them, put them to use, and in the end, weeks, months, however much time it takes, in the end, to be free of their symptoms. I pray all this in Jesus' mighty name. Amen. Okay. For subscribers, I tell you to hit the notification button. Most days I'm up. Yesterday I wasn't. Yesterday was a long day. Today's been a busy day. Story of my life. So make sure if you're subscribing that you hit the notification button so you know when I upload these videos. As always, I appreciate a thumbs up if you get something out of this video. And God willing, I have a birthday party to go to tomorrow with one of my grandkids. My wife and I, come February, we'll have 13 grandchildren. So it's a busy life. We have 5 children, 13, going to be 13 grandchildren, and a church. I'm still full-time pastor, and on and on. Okay, anyway, God willing, I will be with you here tomorrow on the Oasis. And until then, God bless you with great peace.